All right. Hello, everyone. We are moving on to Chapter 3 of Tactics, which is the actual introduction for the Columbo method. First things first, this is the first tactic to be learned. It's pretty foundational. Just keep the examples that are used in the book in mind. And he talks about that initial 10-second window. That's typically the amount of time when you have somebody in front of you to really initiate a conversation. After that, things tend to get a little bit awkward. All right, questions. Asking questions enables you to escape the charge. You're twisting my words. A question is a request for clarification specifically so that you don't twist their words. When I ask a clarification question, my goal is to understand a person's view and its consequences, not to distort it. So that's basically where this Columbo tactic is coming from. You're asking questions, seeking clarification or reasons, or asking them to consider something else, and you'll see how that works as you get more experience in asking questions. It'll be much easier to ask those questions, but essentially asking questions is a really good way to engage other people. I put learning from TV because the example is the old Columbo TV show, which I've never seen, but I don't think you need to watch it to be able to really get what's being talked about. Again, questions help us gain information, or it helps us go on the offensive in an inoffensive way. So when you ask questions, people tend to be flattered and will, answer your questions because they like to talk about themselves or talk about something that they enjoy. So when you use this approach, you're going to be more likely to get more engagement from that person because you're asking them questions, genuine questions, where you're trying to learn more about what they think on something. And then once you gain enough information, it's usually easier to either respond to their view, or you can help lead them down the path to show what the actual outcome of their view is if you follow it to its end. So it's just make sure you have a plan, which you'll learn more about as you go through this course. You'll learn how to develop a plan as you get more experience, because it's not the most easy thing to do when you're not used to interacting with people all the time, especially on topics, such as religion or God or morality or anything like that. Advantages of asking. So people, again, like to talk about themselves, and questions give them the chance to do that. It shows that you're interested in what they have to say. All right? So you will learn, and the example in the book is about the Buddhist. So ask a Buddhist about their views, don't just read a book on it. So the main reason for this is there's the academic version of a religion and the folk version of the religion. So academic version is typically those held by those that are educated in that field, so priests, theologians, a guru, what have you. And the folk version is the view that's held by the layperson, so the followers, the congregation, the uneducated about their specific belief system. And that information you can actually find in Winfred Corduane's book, Neighboring Faiths. He talks about the folk version of a religion, and you'll see differences in a folk version versus the academic version. And it's good to understand both versions because it can change. Knowing that can change how you interact with a person. So if you're interacting with an academic, you may want to interact in a different way than if you're interacting with the folk version of a religion. So questions keep you from stating your own view and having to defend it. So when you're asking questions, you're not actually claiming anything. You're simply putting the ball into the other person's court. So when you're asking questions and they're talking about what their view is, their personal stance, then they are the ones that are making claims, and they're the ones that are going to have to back up any claims that they do make. So Columbo, what do you mean by that? So the first question is, what do you mean by that, or some version of it? This is meant to help you gather information for them to clarify their position. So advantages makes conversation interactive. So your goal is to not misunderstand or misrepresent. You are knowing what the person thinks. So questions are neutral. Like I said, when you ask a question, you're not trying to prove a point by asking a question. You're just gathering information. So it also gets you valuable time. So you can think of responses or other questions, which will help you bring about formulating a defense. Then it keeps you in control of the conversation. Because if you're asking questions, they're doing the majority of the talking. So really, you by asking certain questions, you can direct where the conversation goes. So if you see something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you could focus your questions on that part, and then they're basically leading you down to where you want to be. So you ask questions a certain way or focus on a certain area, and they will take you right down that way because people like answering questions for the most part. And then the conclusion, this is only part of this specific tactic. There's actually 3 parts to this, so it's 3 separate questions, and each question that's here has variations, and you can make up your own variation. But there's 3 parts to the Columbo tactic, and we will go over that over the next 3 weeks. Remember, a questioner is not asserting anything, so you don't actually have the burden of proof when you're asking questions, because you're not actually claiming anything. This is the start of making your conversations interactive, neutral, fun, keeps you in control, and gives you time. So, when in doubt, ask a question, because you're gonna be learning more about the person, and if you need time to think of something, a way to respond, you can ask a question. It gives you a little bit more time to think how you're going to respond. And don't forget, if you don't know, you can always say that you don't know, and you can come back to it. That is okay. That's more respectful, respectable when you say you don't know, but you'll go ahead and find an answer and then get back to the person you're talking to. And then once you learn to question, you will be much better at answering. So when you get good at asking questions, you're going to get a lot better at answering questions, because you see how people answer those questions, and you think of how you would answer these questions. And the more questions you ask, the much better you're going to get at answering. Like I said, this is the first part of a 3-part, grouping for the Columbo, and it's just taking small bites out of it. If there's any other question, or if there's any questions specific to this first part, you can go ahead and email me or send something in the Google Classroom, and I would be happy to answer it. But everything in it's pretty straightforward, just learning how to ask some questions, and I hope you learned a bunch. Thanks for listening.